Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi şirah li sadri ve yessir li emri vahlul min lisani yefkahu kavli. Selamun aleyküm ve rahmetullahi ve berekatuhu. Inshallah, we will continue with the second branch of 24th world.
This explains two mysteries which comprise the keys to many further mysteries. First mystery: why do the saints differ greatly in their visions and illuminations, although they are unanimous on the principles of belief? Why are their illuminations, which are at the degree of witnessing, sometimes opposed to reality and contrary to the truth? And why, in their ideas, which they consider to be the truth, establishing them through decisive proofs, do thinkers and scholars see and show reality in a way that contradicts one another? Why does one truth take on numerous colors? So, I mean, it's, I think, pretty straightforward. He's posing a really intriguing question. Here he's saying saints, but of how different truths are concluded at, which seem to sometimes either contradict each other or sometimes not be represented by the reality that one person experiences as opposed to another person's experience. And although that, all of these people who might seriously think and investigate reality come to their truths through very convincing or decisive proofs, nevertheless, the conclusions they seem to come to be tainted or colored in different fashions. So I guess the question he's asking here is, shouldn't it be, or one way to understand the question he's asking is, if there is one truth, shouldn't all the different truths that serious thinkers and scholars conclude at come to be the same? Isn't that supposed to be what truth is all about, I guess? And I guess he's emphasizing here that these are, again, people who are unanimous on the principles of belief. So you're coming with the same principles, all in very, I guess, utilizing proofs and various degrees of investigations, but nevertheless, coming to different takes and understandings of what reality is like. And I think the last question just summarizes it very nicely. Why does one truth take on numerous colors? And he's not posing an answer here, and maybe he'll do that after the second mystery. But do we have any questions about that? Or yeah.
Anybody wants to give us a summary about what we are reading, like 24th word, and looking in general? I guess for newcomers.
Okay. So, so in the 23rd word, let's start from there. So in the 23rd word, we were talking about human and belief. So it was about human being created in the best of the forms. What does this mean? And what does it mean that human believes in God? So what sort of a relationship is that? And when we come to the end of 23rd word, in there, the author was saying that human is going to, because of the neediness of human establishes a relationship with the Creator by asking from Him, the supplication. And the supplication was being done through names of the Creator. Now in the 24th word, first branch, so overall in the 24th word, he is talking about God, there is no God but He. His are the most beautiful names. So God having most beautiful names, what does this mean? And we studied this in the first branch. So God having all beautiful names. This was the main theme in the first branch. And he gave some examples for that, and saying that like a king having multiple titles, the Creator is manifesting merciful is a manifestation that we observe, knowledgeable, powerful, all-knowing. These are the things that we observe in the existence. So through those manifestations, we get to know the Creator. So now in this second branch, since we are moving to second branch from the first, he is asking the question of, as Ayşenur was saying, different people, and all of them are apparently rightly guided, but looking at the same existence, they come up with sometimes just opposing conclusions, or like contrary to each other, if I'm reading it right. And even he says when it comes to the, so he divides the question into two. The first part is, saints are sometimes coming up with explanations which are apparently contrary to truth. They witness something, they claim that they witness something, but it doesn't fit with what I am observing in existence, so as if it's contrary to truth. And then this is for the saints, he says. And for the people, let's see. Okay, scholars and thinkers. So in the second part of the question, now he is talking about the thinkers and scholars, and apparently they are talking about reality now. But sometimes what they put forth contradicts one another. How come this is possible? What does this mean? And I guess we should again keep in mind that the author was talking about beautiful names of the Creator being multiple before we come to this point. So I'm expecting that this will now be the answer being related to different names of the Creator, the way that we formulated the question.
And I suppose just to add that, you know, this question is something, is a line of inquiry that's usually articulated by many people, regardless of their background, with different terminologies and different methodologies or whatnot. But I suppose what we can pay attention to as he elucidates upon it is the approach that he's taking, and how he's incorporating a belief perspective into the answer that he will hopefully give. Yeah, I think we should pay attention to how he goes about answering. So I don't have much else to add for this group.
There was a question from online participants. Asim says, any example of a truth as such? So just to make it more concrete, I guess.
It's hard to summon them at will. I mean, I'm trying to think of some concrete examples, but
I guess there is a reason why he separated saints and the scholars. So because when it comes to saints, he talked about their visions and illuminations. When he was talking about scholars, he was more talking about truth. So some, I would say, very famous examples, especially, for instance, like that's Ibn Arabi or such scholars, they were such saints, I would say. They were coming up with visions such as we saw a mountain called Kaf, like it's Kaf, mountain Kaf. And people say there's no such mountain on earth. Which mountain are you guys talking about? And they say this mountain is such and such wide, and it is beyond this place, but there's no such mountain in the world that we observe. Are these guys lying, or what are they talking about? Like, supposedly these are, and apparently these are good people. They are rightly guided, much more knowledgeable and accurate than I am. Still, they are talking about such visions which doesn't really make sense to me. This might be for the, as he says, why are there illuminations which are at the degree of witnessing, sometimes opposed to reality and contrary to truth? This might be one of them. And then when he talks about thinkers and scholars, they see and show reality in a way that contradicts one another. Any ideas about this one?
I guess I mean in more general terms, my understanding about the nature of something that I'm experiencing might be very different than the conclusion that another person has about the nature of that same thing that they're experiencing. And that doesn't help much in terms of not being vague. I don't want to get into the specifics either of how one interpretation would be different, but I guess that there seem to be, in general, different interpretations that all seem to be, as you said, rightly guided and yet different. I don't know, does anyone else want to give an example? Possible. And I think it'll perhaps become more clear as we go into it, but I don't know, maybe Brother Austin might have an example of something in mind that could help us out. Or anyone for that matter, online.
We have an acceptable, or do we agree on what the truth is? Like, you see the words, some things are opposed to reality and contrary to the truth. Who establishes what truth is? Right? Is that how we observe things, how we understand them? Right? And is there some objective way of interpreting the world, and that is what truth is? Or do we even need to go into this?
I guess we can eventually get into there. To me, the first one is a little bit easier with that toy example that I gave, like the mountain cup. I mean, if there's no such mountain in terms of the definition of mountain that we know of, and if this person is truly explaining, no, truly there is such a mountain, then I guess we have some sort of pretty much we can agree upon what are the mountains on earth and what are not. So in this sense, there's not much debate whether truly there is a mountain calf on earth, for example. I mean, we would definitely say there is or there is not, right? For the second case, though, it is choosing words a little bit more careful. Says, and why in their ideas, which they consider to be the truth, establishing them through decisive proofs, do thinkers and scholars see and show reality in a way that contradicts one another. So in there, he is not using this sort of a more decisive way of saying this is truth, but he's now talking about two different people of knowledge in this case. They are not saying that I saw it, but they're saying that this is my line of thought, this is my line of reasoning, and because of this, this is truth. So he is coming up with some sort of a logic behind why he says this is true. And then as an observer, you're looking like, okay, you can follow this line of thought, you can follow the other line of thought. So why does one truth take on numerous others? So the second one.
But they're both still true. Like, so, it's not like one saying the world is meaningful, another one saying no, it's despair or it's pointless. Like that's not what we're talking about here, right? These are both truths.
He doesn't make a distinction in here that clear, but as if he says that truth is taking numerous colors. It looks like the author is sort of saying that they have both true aspects. I mean, he's not, my understanding from the way that the question is formed, he's not saying one is true, the other one is like, one is 100% right, the other one is 100% wrong. The way that the question is being formed, as if he says truth is taking colors. My understanding is it seems true, the other one also seems true. So how come that truth is changing colors? Or which might mean this has a lot of true aspects, the other one also has a lot of true aspects as well. How come this happens? And before we go any further, I just want to open up a small parenthesis following up with Atik's question. So who decides what is true? Likewise, we say something is wrong as well. This is just the dual of the same question. So this is another thing to keep in mind when we are questioning what is true. And when I say something is wrong, why do I say it's wrong? And when I say something is true, why do I say it's true? Because these are the things that we might want to keep in mind and when we are reading the rest of the text. And when it gets into a more proper, I guess, content, we can discuss further, just to keep in mind.
Thank you. And Brother Asim has his hand up, so I'm going to mute myself.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. So one example I was thinking of, in the author's text also, he makes, like for example, the case of divine determining. He compares like such different ideas also in that case, although I think the truth is the same in terms of that everything must, be driven or established by the source of the existence of the universe, but the approaches being taken are somewhat varied. So that is, one kind of idea, example that came to my mind, but just throwing it out in case, because I wasn't clear at all, because it's very vague in terms of, how does the truth take different colors so that I can understand, based on one's capacity and understanding and how much one is really using or of their awareness and consciousness, their human self, in terms of getting to the reality of trying to understand how the things are. But just in terms of the thinkers and scholars see or show reality in a way that contradicts one another. So that was the example I thought of. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, please go on.
So, yes, we can ask such questions. Who determines the truth? What is the truth? And so on. And we can try to answer, but I will do something else because I cannot answer myself such questions. So one thing which attracts my attention, he calls it as a first mystery. It's a mystery because when you study it, you will learn something that you were not aware before. In front of you, it first seems like a puzzle. It's a mystery for you, and you're trying to understand. And the examples he lists, the question is, I guess, whether or not it's really a mystery for me, what he talks. Because it's not a mystery, who cares about the answer? And when it comes to me, I feel this mystery so much, it even sometimes make me, there's a perfect word for it, but what is the verb form of handicap? It prevents me do something or move.
Cripples.
Handicaps me.
Oh, it's also a verb? Okay. It handicaps me, okay, in my daily life. Paralyzes my mind, yes, handicaps, all this, which prevents me do my, continue properly functioning in life. Which is, I have my truths. I have things that I believe. I have things that I'm sure. But it is true. I'm sure that I have 5 fingers. There is no doubt for me. I'm talking about from my perspective. I'm sure that there's a beauty in flowers. I'm sure, when I talk to my brother Yusuf, I feel wisdom. Whatever. I'm sure of it.
Not when you're listening, when you're talking.
Oh, listening, sorry. Thank you for the correction. So that's the wisdom, you see? Alhamdulillah. So anyway, like there are certain things that I'm sure in my life. But when I talk to others, I see that they are not that much sure about the things that I am sure. So for instance, I say, I mean, look at the sun, how beautifully created. It's a huge ball of fire just for me so that, you know, it will illuminate my life. Metaphorically, literally, it will give me, you know, the warmth that I need. Again, literally, not metaphorically. But for some other people, they look at it and they say, oh my God, it's a huge ball of fire. One day it will go, what is it? Blow up or maybe extinguish. Yeah, thank you. Wisdom, alhamdulillah.
Keep listening.
It will extinguish one day. We will freeze. This is their reality. And I say, you know, how so? Like, how this is possible? I'm looking at the sign, I see something. They look at the sun, they see completely another thing, opposite. I see my salvation there. They see their extinction. Contradictory, right? And I ask this question, like, how so? I try to convince them, sometimes fight with them. They fight with me, they try to convince me. And all these examples take place every moment. With your friends, sharing many ideas. You call them as believer, they call you as believer. It comes to a certain discussion. You start a heated discussion with them. Like, how so? Like, we studied all these years together and we don't agree on a certain topic. It cripples you, right? You get angry, you get, you know, you say, like, this is unacceptable, they don't think properly, they should think more, whatever. You try to give all these examples to convince them. They don't. They don't agree. So this is a huge mystery for me. Like, because the only answer I can come up with, I say, you know, maybe I'm stupid. You know, I think it's true, but maybe I'm stupid, it's not true. Or maybe they are stupid. But there's no other way for me. Like, either I am stupid or they are stupid. But at the same time, I know that neither they are stupid, nor I am stupid. So what is the explanation then? And if my Creator is so merciful, why he is giving such a conflict in such important topics among people? So what is the point of this? What is the explanation of this? Right? All these mysteries. Now he says, yes, Vikram, you know, you have some truths. You have, you know, you think this is true. You believe it. It's certain for you. But maybe there is something more to it. Maybe there's a mystery there that you have to solve. So this is what I understand when he says, how so they can be contradictory to truth. I'm not sure he's saying that, you know, I have the truth, whatever it is, and I'm judging some sayings. He says, look at you, this is how you feel, and this is true for me, like this is how I feel. Certain things are true for me, and for me there's no discussion, like I don't care about, you know, whether it is not true for them or not. For me it's true, it's certain. But not for everyone. How so? I guess this is the question here.
And I just want to, after what Brother Wilton was saying, he's also putting some, like, alludes to in the very beginning of the first question. Although they are unanimous on the principles of belief, they are differing in something else. So he also makes this distinction for whatever reason. Like being unanimous in the fundamentals of belief, but saying something contradictory or contrary to truth, observation, whatever, when it comes to something else. This is also an interesting point. So are they, what would happen if they were also contradicting when it comes to fundamentals of belief? Would it still be the same? Or is it like something, or let's call it, fundamentals of belief are solid and unarguable against, but there are something else on which it is, you can give and take in there.
He seems to be drawing some boundaries. He's saying within this limited confine, how can we make sense of this certain problem? Yeah, no, thank you. Those are both really helpful comments for me. There's no other comments or questions, concerns, or epiphanies. We can move on to the second mystery. Yeah. So, okay. He writes, second mystery. Why did the early prophets leave some of the pillars of belief, like bodily resurrection, in brief form, and not explain them in detail like the Quran, so that in the future some of their communities went as far as denying some of those concise pillars? Just going to repeat that. Why did the early prophets leave some of the pillars of belief like bodily resurrection in brief form, and not explain them in detail like the Quran, so that in the future some of their communities went as far as denying some of those concise pillars? Also, why did some of the saints only advance in the affirmation of divine unity, and although they even progressed as far as the degree of absolute certainty in divine unity, some of the pillars of belief appear in their paths very little and in summary form? And as a result, those who followed them in the future did not give the necessary importance to the pillars of belief, and some of them even fell into error, since true perfection is found through the unfolding of all the pillars of belief. Since true perfection is found through the unfolding of all the pillars of belief, why did some of the mystics advance significantly in them, while some remained very backward? Whereas God's most noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, who manifested all the divine names at their maximum degree, and was the chief of the prophets, and the all-wise Quran, which is the luminous chief of all the sacred scriptures, described in detail all the pillars of belief, clearly and in a most serious manner and deliberate way. So he certainly packed in quite a bit, the author packed in quite a bit into the second mystery. And there's a few different questions in here that might be useful to turn to bullet points. I guess one initial question is he's wondering why, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but essentially, the prophets all delivered the same message as the final, as the one that we're familiar with, perhaps. But he's asking why the early ones not elaborate upon certain pillars of belief, like resurrection, right? To the extent that the Quran elaborates upon it or emphasizes upon it. And because of perhaps their lack of elaboration, some of their communities ended up denying what is this, one of the essential pillars. And then the second question I'm not completely sure about. I need to reread that. He writes, why did some of the saints only advance in the affirmation of divine unity? And although they even progressed as far as the degree of absolute certainty in divine unity, some of the pillars of belief appear in their paths very little and in summary form. Again, I think, right, I think he here is posing pretty much the same question in that it seems like even in these group of saints that he's talking about, their focus was on the affirmation of divine unity, but again, without elaborating much on what are the other pillars of belief, and not providing much detail into them, or perhaps focus onto them. And again, just like in the case of the communities concerning the early prophets, those who followed them in these paths also ended up, apparently according to him, falling into error because of the lack of emphasis or detail or explanation on these other pillars. And he doesn't give detail into which pillars, but I guess their sole focus or emphasis was on the notion of divine unity, how to affirm divine unity, and whatnot. So that's the second question. And here he's incorporating some certain comments which we can discuss. I guess, he's in a sense providing an explanation of why he's so concerned about these questions or these mysteries, because he's saying that true, genuine belief comes through the perfection of all the pillars of belief. That you can't, you need all the pillars to have, I don't want to say firm foundation, but you need all, like, the pillars look to each other, and there are various dimensions of this world, and all of them, I guess, according to him again, lead to perhaps the perfection or cultivate the potentiality within the human being that is given to him. And again, he's I guess wondering that why, despite this fact, there's such a difference amongst, either saints or mystics or earlier prophets on some giving emphasis on these pillars, some not, in the end, he's basically summarizing that Muhammad sallallahu, God's most noble messenger, through the medium of the Quran, was able to articulate, the Quran articulated all of these pillars in a very serious and deliberate way, and the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was able to manifest, he says, all the divine names at their maximum degree, and maybe utilize his human potentialities in the best of ways. So, clearly he's saying that the Quran describes all these pillars in much detail and emphasizes them and allows for the cultivation of the human being in response to them. But there is a seeming divergence or a difference in explanation or elaboration when it comes to either earlier prophets who are supposed to have essentially carried the same message, or different saints or mystics who focused on one thing or left another thing. So in a sense, this seems like, of course, it's not the same line of inquiry as the first mystery, but it has the same flavor to it. So these are the questions that I extracted from the second mystery, and I guess we can also, as we go into it, talk about why this is important for me, right? And this is a large topic, but why and how can I experience all the pillars of belief in my life in a practical fashion? Why are they so important for me? Why are they so necessary? How can I find, quote unquote, true perfection through the understanding and experience of these pillars of belief? Or else I suppose they do become certain dictums that I can memorize and cite and say, well, these are the 6 pillars, and this is part of my religion, etc., etc. But what role are they to play for me? And I've talked quite a bit, so I'm growing tired of my own voice. Any other concerns, questions regarding at least the first paragraph of the second mystery? Online participants, mashallah, I'm very pleased and happy to see that we're joined by so many colorful names today. So I would be very grateful to have all of your beautiful voices color this discussion as well, instead of the usual ones here. Although the usual ones are also welcome, of course. So that's about as generous as I'm going to get in my invitation for you to talk. And now I've alienated the ones here. So yes, Brother Sohail Dar, I'm listening to you.
I guess to help you out. So he says, I mean, he's sort of making a bold claim. I'm not disagreeing with him, but I'm just here to play, I guess, devil's advocate, so to speak. When that very long last sentence of the paragraph says, since true perfection is found through the unfolding of all the pillars of belief, why did some of the mystics advance significantly in them while some remained very backward? Whereas God's most noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, manifested all the divine names at their maximum degree, and was the chief of the prophets in the all-wise Quran, which is the luminous chief of all the sacred scriptures, described in detail all the pillars of belief, clearly and in a most serious manner and deliberate way. I guess my simple question is, did he? And if he did, where do I find it? I guess the answer is already in that sentence, would be the Quran. But I guess do others feel that he has? Because I get when you and I guess this question kind of sort of talks about the familiarity of the Hadith tradition, but if you look at it, I mean, there's no book authored by the Prophet. I guess the only book associated with him, but not authored by him, is the Quran. But there's no he doesn't have like an exegesis. There is no scholarly work by the Prophet. Nothing exists out there. Just some few sayings here and there, collected in some books. And even at that, very particular, because he's talking to particular people. So I don't know how people feel about, because, I mean, Nursi's making that statement. Obviously, he has a reason to say that. So I don't know how people feel about that statement. Because the reason I say that is his contention is that people of the past prophets have fallen into error because all things weren't expounded upon. They weren't explained. But, even during the prophetic time and afterwards, not everyone believed, and somewhat as far as denying certain aspects of belief. So what makes him unique, or I guess what makes the Quran unique in respect to all other scriptures and prophets?
Thank you for sharing that comment. And okay, yes.
I'll just say one thing. I guess my question is sort of directed at Aisha or the moderator. Like, if you went to a university, or I guess anybody for that matter, if you went to a university and made that statement, like, would they take it seriously? Like, what is his basis for making that?
Sorry, what statement?
This last sentence, that the Prophet is the chief of the prophets, the Quran is the chief of the sacred scriptures, and all things are delineated clearly, unlike anything else in the past.
Are you asking whether this statement would be taken seriously if I went and said it at what is essentially my workplace?
Yeah, I guess. Well, anyone for that matter. Yeah. Like, I mean, the fundamental question is, like, how do people feel about that statement that he's making? Because, I mean, Nursi often does this. He doesn't actually tell you. He doesn't give you specifics per se. He just, like, he never really tells you specifically about the Prophet. It's in very much so in a general way.
I think you highlight an important point, which is that he is describing or invoking the Prophet by virtue of certain titles, let's say chief of the prophets, or by virtue of what he's done or is doing, rather than something that's personal to him. But I mean, I don't quite understand what the significance of me saying that sentence at my certain settings would be. There's a lot to unpack here. I don't think I would be able to say it without a certain context. Without coming out as coming and waving a flag.
Well, the reason I'm saying is he's saying that fundamentally other people have fallen into error. My question is, how do people necessarily feel about that statement of his? Do people sort of agree or disagree, or because it's sort of making a statement about like other about, I guess, other communities. He says that right there. He says in the future some of their communities went as far as denying some of those concise pillars. Is that that's my question.
Before I continue, can everyone hear me okay? There have been some complaints about how the sound is reaching your ears. So can I just have like a thumbs up or like a check mark? Oh, we have another comment. Let's see. H Bezos says it's better now. Shayla says yes. Brother Amin says low quality. I don't like it. Is that just Brother Amin, or is it other people? His standards for sound might be higher than the average. Okay, people are saying it's fine. Sorry, Brother Amin. I'm going to have to, you're going to have to deal with it. Sorry. Okay, well, Brother Asim is saying, awesome. I don't know why I said Asim agreed could be better. Awesome, listen to him if not. Okay, well, all right, so I'm being told to ignore all of you. So I'm just gonna as long as it's decent enough, maybe move the mic closer to yourself. Now I'm seeing.
Let's continue.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, as long as I'm. All right. You're not missing much if you're not hearing me anyway. But and yes, I have the tablet with me, so all comments I see, not other people, FYI. And now I'm just going to stop and pass over the mic to Brother Yusuf, inshallah.
So I guess for the second question, there was something that attracted my attention. So the first question is interesting on its own accord, saying that the previous messengers came up with, again, pillars, fundamentals of belief was there, but some of them were not that much detailed. This is why, like I visited, for example, some synagogue, and I was curiously asking to the Jewish people on the table, we were breaking the bread together with them, saying that, how about hereafter? They said, well, there's no hereafter, for example. So this was the first time I truly confirmed by someone who follows that faith, saying that there's no belief in hereafter. This is the life. There's no other life. So then apparently some people eventually denied one of the pillars of belief. And the author says, yeah, in their scriptures, the topic of hereafter was not as much detailed. So this is the first question. So in the lack of much of detail, maybe it can be understood why those people are not denying it. So first he is putting the question on the side of why there's not much explanation. But then he says, how about the followers of Muhammad? Because the Quran has full-blown explanation. The messenger is explaining with his life to whatever possible extent in the full-blown sense. But then his followers are also still not able to, among his followers, some saints, some sages, mystics are becoming like either to the extent that some of them are denying some of the pillars. So maybe the issue is not only a matter of giving full explanation. Even in the presence of full explanation, people are ending up denying some of the pillars.
Right.
So how come about the second aspect then?
Right. I mean, despite, as you're saying, despite as the author saying the Quran's heavy emphasis on these other pillars, it's not as though the communities of the Quran, or what are to be the communities of the Quran, are all fully living and accepting and understanding these as well. Yes, Brother Sohail, please go ahead.
To what Yusuf said, and then I guess at least the answer, I was thinking about the question I posed, tying both the first and second mystery. I don't know what people think, but I don't know what it says in Turkish, but to me, there's a contrast between prophecy and sainthood he's making, between visions and illuminations and reality. And to me, that's the distinguishing factor, because you can say you read the Quran or follow the Quran's teaching, but the question is, the Quran has a certain, I guess, I don't know if the right word is agenda, but certain lens through how it's trying to convey belief to you. It's through the witnessing of reality, witnessing of the universe. And to me, that's the distinction between, knowing all the pillars of the belief or seeing them unfold before your very own eyes. Like, it's not something you have to sort of, I guess, imagine, like compared to the first mystery, where you may get some aspect of the truth, I guess. Like you may see, you may feel or see it in a certain way, but there's something to be said about how the Quran presents belief under the witnessing of the universe, or witnessing of reality. And to me, that's kind of how I see it, as being the chief of all sacred scriptures. And the prophet who manifests divine names, and divine names fundamentally are manifest, as in they're real. They exist out there in the universe, and they exist within man himself. And so he demonstrates that by making them known, by reading them. And to me, that's I'm not saying any other prophet didn't do that, but through the Quran, which is, I guess, tied to prophecy, that to me is how at least I think what North is going to talk about, seeing sort of reality as it is, because you see it. I mean, you experience it and make sense of it right there. It's not something you sort of, imagine. I'm not putting out imagination. What I'm saying is like it's your idea that's not grounded in reality. That's why, the last thing I'll say is, he says, why did some of the saints only advance in the affirmation of divine unity? And although they even progress as far as the degree of absolute certainty of divinity, some of the pillars of belief in a belief appear in their past very little and in summary form. A tangible example is, like, Norsi talks about in the words, what are angels? The way he presents it has very much to do with your experience of reality. It's not just some sort of thing that's like separate from the universe that you imagine, that, as is commonly understood, some sort of spirit being that you sort of have to contrive in your mind. And to me, that's the distinguishing factor that Nursi, probably like he always does, is probably going to talk about.
Thank you, Suhail, for that. And so you are emphasizing that the Quran has a specific way through which it conveys its truth, which is that of witnessing reality, or seeing reality as it is, which is an interesting phrase to think about. Any other comments from our side? All right, Suhail, please go ahead.
I'll say one more thing. To me, that's, even when the Quran is studied, let's say in a secular sense, you can't do that, because you're sort of missing the point of the Quran. The Quran it's not like fundamentally, in its totality, I'm saying, unlike like other scriptures, because it's just a manual to explain how things are. It's literally decoding the riddle of the universe. hence the chief of all scriptures, because that's the point of it. So it was, and all pillars of belief necessarily come out of your assessment of your experiences within the universe. So not just the necessarily existent one or the necessity of Godhead, but the necessity of angels, because that's what you conclude it has to be such. And the necessity of revelation, and the necessity of prophecy, and the necessity of the resurrection, and necessity of divine determining. Those aren't things you just out of the blue. They're necessary conclusions you come to, that the Quran is pointing to you by looking at yourself and looking at yourself within the context of the rest of the cosmos.
That certainly makes sense, and you relay this decisively. But I guess it begs the question then of, in relation to the first mystery, if it was as simple as just, the Quran decoding the universe to us, how do we then come to a situation where we have all these different truths that are concluded to, and sometimes in apparent clashing with each other, despite coming from same principles of belief? And maybe these are two different topics at hand, but it makes me think that, seeing as these two mysteries are listed back to back. And Brother Yusuf, please go ahead.
So just something that, again, the author is hinting within the question. When he describes the messenger, says, whereas God's most noble messenger, who manifested all the divine names at their maximum degree. I guess this is an important description for a messenger, for the messenger, just to keep in mind. What does it mean that the messenger, and it's another question to say, well, did Muhammad was such a person? But even before that, what does it mean a human being the best, or manifesting all divine names at their maximum degree? What does that mean? Second question that follows is, does there need to be a human being which is going to manifest such a thing? The third question that will follow is Muhammad is the person who manifests this? And a fourth question follows, if he does, then what shall I expect from the followers of this messenger? Because in the beginning part of that question, he said some of the scholars or some of the sages, mystics, they were...
Sorry, but I didn't get why he says mystics. In original, it's just Ehli Hakikat.
Was it Arif?
People of truth.
No, it's not even Arif there. Anyway, sorry for...
Okay.
Because mystic sounds like a mystical.
Hakiki Arif olan evliya.
But it's not this sentence. Why did some of the mystics advance significantly in them while some remained backward? Which is another sentence.
Okay. So then, yeah, so such people were focusing on certain thing, and they were, let's say, not focusing on the rest. So as if he is not making a comparison between such people and the messenger. So for such people, they were, as if he is alluding to saying that they were being manifestation of a certain name very strongly, but not the rest of it. So their followers deviated eventually. But in the case of messenger, he is manifesting all the names to the utmost degree. So what's wrong with the people that are, or how come it is possible that his followers are not being able to keep the balance that was initially there?
Is that justifying that the followers of the older prophets, since they weren't manifesting all the names, and it was expected that they fall astray? Like, isn't this a flawed reasoning, or it seems?
Elaborate more.
The way you put it forward, the way I'm understanding it, is the Prophet Muhammad is manifesting all the names. So unlike the old prophets who didn't manifest all the names, so you could expect their followers, the followers of the older prophets, to fall astray because all the names weren't manifested perfectly, let's say, clearly. But with Prophet Muhammad, we're saying that they're all clearly manifested. So why are we following astray?
Yeah. So I guess in the first one, this is why maybe he started the question from the previous prophets. So why was it that they were not?
How do you come to such a conclusion that they're not manifesting all the names?
So I guess he's starting it from, let's say, resurrection not being detailed as much as it is being detailed in Quran. So he has a reference point to compare. So it's not that much clearly explained, let's say, for the Jews in the Torah. Not to say that it was not mentioned at all, but it was not as clear as it is being described in Quran. So why is that, first of all? So he says, then a question pops up, well, if it was explained as clear as in Quran, maybe they wouldn't fall into the error that they fell. But then he extends the question saying that, well, wait a second, Quran is explaining it to full-blown, yet people are falling into error in that. So it's not only a matter of explaining or not explaining what's going on in here.
So Suhail has some comments. He's saying not to the maximum degree. Everyone manifests all the names, but of course not to the same degree. And I think Brother Yusuf raised some important questions and points, so I'm just going to go over them again. First, and then afterwards Suhail can speak. First, he was asking, what does it mean for all the divine names to be manifested at a maximal degree? Secondly, does there need to be such a person? Thirdly, is the prophet, as we know him, this person? And finally, if he is, what shall I expect from the followers of such a person? I guess, what does it mean for me? So these were the 4 questions that I extracted. And Suhail can go right ahead.
I should know you're asking that question about, I think I've understood the question correctly, about the first mystery and second mystery together, about the saints and how they get some sort of vision or an illumination. No one is deprived of inspiration. I guess this is another discussion, but everyone is inspired. Otherwise, how do you explain whatever you know or think you know or feel? That's all, God given. You can't explain their existence without a cause of existence, a source, the creator of the universe. So if a saint or a mystic or whatever you want to call them, these individuals ponder long enough, think hard enough, the order is such that man's going to be inspired with something. Now, that inspiration is colored through the lens of how you see things. You can't equate it to divine revelation, which by definition is God's speech, the absolute, unadulterated speech of the creator of the universe. So, and Nursi talks about this, and I guess in other places, but so I can realize, talking about the first mystery, I can appreciate maybe some wisdom or some aspect of the universe, but I can never be certain about how true it is, or how close to the truth it gets, or how much encompassing of the truth it is, because it's still filtered through my, I guess, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but like the ego, man's perception of the world. It's coming, that it's how I perceive things. So even, I guess, for example, even when somebody reads the Quran and they say, I gleaned this insight, that's still their insight. They can never say, nobody can say this is absolutely what the speaker means, or for that matter, completely what the speaker intends. So, and in this way, Rushi's not necessarily putting them down, but what he's saying is you are capturing just an element of the truth, but not the complete unfolding of the pillars of belief, which the Quran is very concise and direct about. And You can't. It's like getting the answer sheet to the test. The test being the universe, I guess, the problem to be solved, and the Quran is the most obvious, clear solution. Like there's nothing more obvious than that, which is the truth.
Yes, go ahead.
So the way I read this paragraph is, which is very related to the first mystery, I guess. But in the first mystery, we were saying that when we look at around other people, we see that there are many topics, many subjects that people do not agree, sometimes contradicts, and so on. And now in the second mystery, he says, like, even if we take just believers, we see that there is no a complete, maybe word is not agreement, but not everyone said the same thing. And whomever you look, you will see some partial truths in them. Some people will say, one part of the truth, the other people would say another part of the truth. And I'm using this truth very loosely here. The only thing you will realize when you look at Iran, when you talk to other people, you will say, for instance, yes, she's right, but. He's right, but, right? You will have this in your life. Even among believers. You will say, yeah, okay, he's really good about proving God, but sometimes he is being so rushed to people. He's very sensitive to people, but he's sometimes missing the point, whatever. You will see that, but. So it wouldn't, completely satisfy you. It's the same thing with you as well. Like you would say, okay, sometimes I'm patient, but sometimes I can understand this kind of topics, but I am not good with others, whatever. There's always this being partial, not complete, from your perspective. And he's, I guess, asking the question, like, why this is the case? Isn't the, let's say, a better or more complete version reality, isn't it given to us? Because you can take this being partial, you can interpret it in a way, you say that, okay, we are all limited people, we only have access to limited things. This is the most I can do, right? You can say that. But if you approach from this perspective, you're kind of denying that whatever you have is given to you from the one who creates everything, right? So if this is the case, like why, wherever I look, I see only a partial of what I'm looking for, part of what I'm looking for. Why this is not the case? Like, isn't the more complete version available? He asks. And he says, it seems like it is available. At least, again, from my perspective, when I look at the teaching of the Prophet, I see that, it's complete, more complete than other people I see. Or when I look at the Quran, when I read it, I see it is, it seems like, it's complete. It touches upon one aspect that one person seems to be expert, but it also touches upon other aspects as well that he is missing. So it seems like a complete version available out there, but still it's not accessed, or it's not accepted, or it's not used by people. So why so? Like, he's not going with the first interpretation. He's not saying that, well, we are just limited people, and this is the only thing I can achieve. He says, wait a second, we're not achieving anything. Like, we are given things. And it seems like we are given a complete picture out there in the Quran. If it is there, if it is available, why still people can only take one part of it. When I look at Yusuf, I only see wisdom, but nothing more. I look at Abdurrahman, I see compassion, but nothing more. But when I read Quran, or when I look at the life of Prophet, I see both wisdom and compassion. It is there, it is available, but why they are not able to find it, or why they are not able to follow it the way I read from Prophet's life, let's say. I guess this is the question here. Like author said, from my perspective, a complete picture available, but for some reason, we are not able to follow it.
So I have a few questions, but before that, as we have very careful listeners, Sahel says, more complete or the most complete? I guess this is in regard to, as you were saying, the Quran seems more complete. So he's asking more or most?
I guess it's like self-critical. I think there's no such thing as, more or less complete. When I look at Quran, I see that it is complete, like there is no gap. This is what I see. There is no gap. I cannot find any gap. But when I look at the people who follow Quran or who follow other ideologies, I see some gaps. If complete picture is there available, why we see all these gaps? So it seems like it's not the problem of availability. It's some other problem. So why it is?
Right. And before I let other people speak, I guess all this language about complete or less complete or more complete, it makes me ask the question of, since I seem to be receiving partially constantly, either whether I realize it in myself, I'm not bad in this quality, but this, I'm not so great, or as you were saying, giving examples, I see this quality, but not that quality, or, they're right to this extent, but wrong to that extent. There's also all these sort of partialness. How can I ever register or judge what completion looks like? Was my question, or whether there are, what does it mean for there to be no gaps in the Quran? But I guess this one response that I then internally gave myself was, I guess, in accordance with whatever my human expectations are.
And you look at it, you experience it. It's not an issue of imagination. It's not like you trying to, like you sitting on your chair and trying to find a better explanation or a complete explanation. So this is the first way of approaching it. Taking a human being as an explorer, a discoverer. Like I am a human, I have these capacities, limited or not, and I'm trying to find what is out there. You can look at this way, and then such questions becomes reasonable. How I know, what I find is partial or not, and so on. In the second way, you realize that whatever you have, you are given. And you also given this Quran book. You can read, you can understand. You are also given some narrations about Prophet. You are also given whatever. You look at them, you experience them, and you say that, yes, this is complete, this is what I'm looking for. But I don't see this complete picture when I look at Yusuf, when I look at Atik, when I look at Birkan. I don't see this complete picture. Why? They read the same thing. Or even if they don't read it, obviously it's not an issue of availability. The message is out there, like whoever wants to reach it can reach it.
That's an issue of free will.
Whatever the issue, right? I guess author is asking, what is the issue then? Because if it was not available, he wouldn't ask these questions. He wouldn't say, why people have only this but that, whatever. Because he wouldn't be available for him in first place. But he says, I see it, it's in front of me, message, and it seems complete. But why all these clever people, all these people who are really sincere, who are really, willing to reach this complete message, but still they are partial? Why? At least this is how I understand it.
Okay, so my favorite thing in the world is seeing hands up. And hands disappear as I just said that. But okay, so Brother Sahel can go first, and then H. Beza afterwards, inshallah.
So I'll just keep my comments brief. One, to answer your question, how do I know? As you said, I would expand it. I wouldn't say just under the witnessing of the self, which is, your human qualities, expectations, but therefore, if you expand it, under the witnessing of the universe. So that's how you know what the truth must be. And you are part of the universe. So the collection of all that there is, that's how you know what the truth must be. That's why, as Birkan was saying, it's not just something, I'm just going to relax on my couch one day and just sort of contrive things like out of nowhere. There's like grounded in who I am and what am I experiencing and what's out there. And so if a scripture doesn't talk about resurrection, or let's say doesn't acknowledge it, or briefly talks about it, or doesn't address it within the context that I desire eternity, then it's not addressing the thing. It's not being witness to the universe. It's not explaining what's within the universe, which myself included, is that I have an expectation of perpetual existence, not, fading away into nothingness. So it like scripture by definition has to answer those questions. Otherwise, where is it coming from then? Because then how do I explain where I get these sort of qualities from, these sort of feelings and expectations from? So the one who made me must speak to those things, and therefore also speak to whatever else is in the universe. And to Birkan's question, or the issue that he was talking about, that Nursi is saying, to me, it still goes back to fundamentally, how does one read the Quran? Like, you can say, like, anybody can say they follow the Quran, and I'm not trying to, belittle anybody that says that, and myself included. What does that mean for me to follow the Quran? Is it just, treat it as sort of a scripture that I just seek some sort of blessing from, like I don't know what they call, like a relic or something like that, or is it actually something that's going to explain to me or answer my questions, explain how things are, and not just explain them, but show me how that must be the case? So, for example, that there are qualities being manifested in the universe and pointing them to me and asking me to ponder upon them. That there are angels, and what are they, and pointing them to me, or, sort of elucidating upon what they must be. As he says, since true perfection is found to the unfolding of all the pillars of belief. Unfolding, where is the unfolding happening? Unfolding is happening within my understanding, but my understanding is contingent upon how I perceive things out there, my tangible reality. And that's the uniqueness of God's noble messenger, is that he's able to see the unfolding of all the pillars of belief, and therefore also all the divine names to the maximum degree, because as the Quran being revealed to him directly, or him being the primary recipient of the Quran, the whole point of the Quran is to make known those things. And if so, those things become obvious for him.
Before H. Reza goes ahead, I don't want to sidetrack the discussion, but I was just reminded when Sahel was saying about, your expectation of eternity or eternal happiness, as we always posit it. So just very, very quick sidetrack, I guess, very quick. I'm a little befuddled on this issue because recently I had written a paper that somewhat dealt with this issue a little bit, and I had invoked somehow the notion of fundamental human desire being eternal happiness, while also explicitly stating that I defined eternal happiness as something in the present. But later on, I received some comments from my professor who tore my paper and argument apart, absolutely ravaged it. I was very, I don't know if I should say this publicly, but like a very famous old professor, philosopher. And one of the things that he said was, I completely disagree with your notion that a fundamental human desire is eternal happiness, even as you define it. Because I was very, afraid and steered clear of any notions of afterlife or anything like that. I was like, just eternal bliss as I experience one happy moment to another. But even that apparently was not as fundamental as, I guess sometimes we take it to be as, or we talk about these common human expectations that somehow apparently everyone must agree upon, and usually I steered clear of it, but I thought I would take a risk. But I don't know, it just makes me wonder, like, am I working with presuppositions or assumptions that I don't even know are assumptions when I say that a human expectation is eternal happiness, or just even eternity, or just happiness, or anyways, this was on my mind, so I just got a little sidetracked when you mentioned it, but H-Pesa, please steer us back into the right direction.
I would say one thing before I would ask your professor right before he dies, what's the thing he wants most? Then he'll tell you eternal happiness.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if I can steer us back on track because I may not be there myself, but backtracking a lot more now to Brother Burkhan's questions/comments about the different qualities and my perception of it or somebody else's perception of it, and maybe somebody might agree with what I say, but then they'll say but. So I find within myself that I'm given this sense, and this sense is one which is complete in that because of the completeness of the sense that I have, that I recognize the lack of something when I experience it. And when I experience that lack looks to the lack of perfection of that complete sense, the sense of completeness that I have within me of that particular quality. So when I, let's say, interact with someone and I experience compassion, but perhaps not as much wisdom, or the other way around, it doesn't really matter. In either case, there's still a lack, because even if they manifest, a lot of wisdom, there's still an extent to which that wisdom manifests. And I know this because within myself, I have this sense, although I may not be able to say this is what absolute wisdom is, but rather I can say that is not absolute wisdom. There is a lacking there. So I think in part, depending on my particular circumstances that I find myself in, or life conditions, or whatever it is that I'm experiencing, that makes me more in tune to picking up on a greater lack of something than something else in that particular situation, and being able to perhaps also detect mercy in a situation where perhaps I may not have been able to under other conditions, or I may have had more trouble with it. And I don't know to what extent this example that I was thinking of is applicable, but I was also thinking, like, if I say, imagine like a water bottle or like a teacup, okay? I say, imagine a teacup, and maybe the teacup that Brother Burkan is imagining is a Turkish teacup in his mind. But then the teacup that Aishinur may be imagining might be like a China teacup, like those fragile things. So even like with things that have a concrete reality, even if we think that we're talking about the same thing when we say teacup, in our perception of it, it might be completely two different things. But having said that, the utility of the teacup, as in it holds a drink, right? It has some sort of shape where you're able to pour something into it. That remains the same in either case. So when I pick up on a certain quality, or if two people extract a different face of a reality of sorts, it may not be that it's not rooted in the same thing, but rather it's a different face of that reality. I don't even know if that exactly makes sense, or if that example is a stretch either, but yes, thank you.
Thank you, H. for that comment, and I think your last statement, I felt like your last statement was a good summary of the general point you were trying to make, which is that can there be and are there different facets of reality that look to different people? And yes, and just as a quick reply, I do not agree with Sohail's assertion that Nursi says there is no truth in philosophy. I disagree with that. And do we have any other comments from our side? Yes, Brother Burkan.
About the philosophy and truth. No. I guess with these kind of topics, so it can go very complicated if we allow ourselves to be deceived by certain discussions that we hear, that we sometimes take part. What I'm saying is, sometimes it's enough to solve its small problems that are in front of you. You don't have to solve the bigger problem. You don't have to solve the big problem to solve the small problem in front of you. So in this topic, for instance, we don't have to solve the problem, even if there is such a problem, right? We don't have to solve the problem whether there is truth, there is an absolute truth, there is the objective truth, whatever. You don't have to solve such a problem. Because what is in front of us is a small problem that we can solve. Regardless of your worldview, regardless of your philosophical stance, whatever. There's a small problem in front of us. It is when I look at myself or when I look at my friend, I do see that something is missing. It's not that I'm imagining a better person. I'm trying to design a real human, the human. I look at my friend and I see that something is missing. He's not compassionate enough. I'm not talking about this. It's just a coincidence that I'm using my left hand. Atik. He's not compassionate enough. But I see it. There's no reason to, ask made-up questions in this moment. Oh, Birkan, but can you define the human, the best human? I'm not trying to find the best human. I'm just saying that when I look at Atik, I see that there's something missing. He's not compassionate enough. I look at myself, I see that something is missing. Right? I'm not serious enough, whatever. And I ask the question, is it the case that, maybe there is no such person, maybe there is no such example out there that I can compare or I can follow. But author says, no, there is. Look at Prophet. You will see he's compassionate enough. He's also wise enough. He's also serious enough. Whatever you think, you will find the answer there. You can take it as a claim of the author. That's what he claims, that whatever you think the others are missing, when you look at the Prophet, you will see that it is there. If this is the case, he says, if he is out there, why when I look at the Atik who claims to be a good Muslim, he's not compassionate enough. Here's the example he can follow. In this context, here is the truth that he can follow. But why not? Why when I look at the reality, I see all these missing points in different people, in different groups, in different, I don't know, objects, whatever you want to call. So to solve such a question or to ask such a question, I don't have to construct a made-up question, which is, oh, but can we talk about the truth? Where did the truth come from? I'm only asking about the compassion that I don't see there. So to me, at least, sometimes some questions are just made-up questions. Like I'm not even, trying to solve this question when I say why Atik is not compassionate enough. So it would be, at least from my perspective, it would be unjust for me that I have to answer such a question that I don't even have. So yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you for that. Yes, 1 second.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I was reading this through a historical sort of perspective, trying to understand why the early prophets would leave some of the pillars of belief behind when we know, they were sent with revelation. It's not their own decision to make. And I guess, what I was reading was it's contextual, right? As the prophets' ayats are revealed, right? It's not as the book that is that we have in front of us. It's not a complete compiled book that it's, there's a certain context, there's a certain situation that the ayat is revealed. And so I guess what I was thinking was that what was sent to the earlier prophets was directly relevant to what their people, the people that they were sent to, what they were dealing with, right? We know that the children of Israel, right, at the time of Musa, they were, they were freed from bondage, trauma, and they were suffering from trauma and things like that. And when he went to the cave or went to the mountain and came back, they were worshiping a cow, a gold cow. And so, it might not be directly relevant for them to be understand or to be taught about the hereafter. Maybe the most important thing for them to learn is of who Allah is, who God is. And so I guess that's, what I saw. And then I guess there's a series of prophets, each sent to different people as the teachings move on. You have to renew the faith. And maybe every time the people are different. And so the emphasis is on a different aspect of the religion. Maybe people know who God is. That's not the issue. Maybe it's that they become forgetful, they become lazy in the practice or the belief. But then, finally, it culminates in the Quran, in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the perfect man, right? And the Quran covers all aspects of, revelation. And so even then, Nursi is saying that the followers of the Prophet, even them, right, despite having this, we fall into error, right? And the example he gives is someone focusing on divine unity. And if I ask why, why that would occur, right? What would lead to this, and what would it resolve into? I guess, the man might be a great scholar or something, and in this time maybe he sees that the people need to know who God is, right? They have trouble understanding the divine unity. But then after he passes away, and he has students, and they have students, and they have students, maybe there's, time passes, but the people are still stuck to these teachings that were relevant in a certain time and place. And now, the teachings are the same, but the emphasis on the teachings is the same, but the people are different. And maybe those teachings are not entirely relevant to those people that are living in that day. And so there's an imbalance, that what is being taught is not what is needed. And so what might be needed is a revival, a second look at the sources and drawing new conclusions based on the context. And so if we applied this to our lives, maybe we've been focusing on something, right? We've been taught to focus on something, and that is, the most important thing, but in reality, it might not be that. Maybe we're focusing on our careers, and maybe there's something else that maybe we're using that to procrastinate or ignore another important aspect of our life, and that's why we're not attaining balance or peace or something like that.
Thank you for that. I feel like we've stayed quite a bit up with the questions that Nursi's offering here. It might be useful to at least read the following paragraph to see a partial explanation. I think that will help us or provide some guidance maybe. So let me just read it. I know our time is also coming to a close, but we can make of it what we will. He writes, because in reality, the most true and complete perfection is thus. Yes, the wisdom in these mysteries is this. For sure, man is the place of the manifestation of all the names, but since his power is slight, his will partial, his abilities various, and desires different, he searches for reality among thousands of veils and barriers. So in uncovering reality and witnessing the truth, barriers intervene. Some people cannot bypass the barriers. Their abilities are all different. The abilities of some cannot support the unfolding of some of the truths of belief. The abilities of some cannot support the unfolding of some of the truths of belief. Moreover, the colors of the names manifestations vary according to the place they are manifested. They become all different. Some people who manifest the names, cannot be the means to the complete manifestation of a name. Also, the manifestation of the names takes on different forms in respect of universality, particularity, shadow, or originality. Some capacities cannot transcend particularity, and some cannot emerge from the shadow. In some capacities, sometimes one name is predominant, and it carries out its words and rules in that capacity. In some capacities, sometimes one name is predominant, and it carries out its word and rules in that capacity. Now we shall make a few indications to this profound mystery and this extensive wisdom with an enigmatical, comprehensive, true, but somewhat complex comparison. And I don't know if I should read the next paragraph.
I guess we can stop here.
Yeah, I think we can stop here. So this is the elucidation that Nursi is offering. Sometimes I just want to copy-paste certain paragraphs into a Word document and separate each sentence from the other, because it's very difficult, I find, for myself to understand them. He's talking, I think, about, first of all, I don't want to say deficiencies, but lackings of a human being, right? My power is slight, my will is partial, and though my abilities are many and my desires different, as he alluded on in the first branch, there are thousands of veils and barriers, and that because of, I guess, the diversity of each person's experience, people take on different names and manifest them to varying degrees and levels. And some people manifest a certain name more, or multiple names more. Some people may only manifest a specific few. But no one really, and I think this was a point that Sohail had made, no one is deprived, right? Everyone is always given qualities and the ability to manifest names. But here again, as a human being, I have free will, and this free will even is partial, and I am impotent also. And so again, Nursi here seems to be highlighting, to my understanding, the ways in which people may partially rather than completely manifest the name, and sometimes may represent it in a very specific way, and it may stay in that specific way for some, as he's talking about here. But I think also that even in particular instantiations of a particular name, there are always, as we talked about and discussed in the first branch, always the names look to each other, and there are ways to connect them, go from particulars to universals. So I am going to leave my comments to that for the time being. Would anyone else like to share?
Abdurrahman was quiet today, not trying to put him on the spot, but just sharing my
Not trying to,
Quote unquote, not trying.
sharing my observation. He was quiet.
I mean, my first reaction when I read this is kind of sadness, I guess. Since I don't have thoughts, I must just say what I feel. No wisdom. Because it just feels like there's so many barriers, and I'm just left to just wander through a maze, let's say. And it almost makes me like, so I can't ever get to the truth. But then, as Brother Brickman was saying, what is this truth that I'm seeking? Am I actually seeking the truth? No, I'm not. I'm just in somewhere, and I'm trying to find maybe more compassion or more wisdom, more truth. And that's all I can say. I have nothing further. However, a lot of questions were raised today. I'm sad that we're not able to answer all of them. I guess I'll be ready for next week.
Halak have many questions but little answers. Yes.
Just a note for one of the words in the translation. When he talks about, he searches for reality among thousands of veils and barriers. The word in the original language he used for barrier is barzakh. And barzakh is not a barrier, I would say, but it's like a passage. So the example that is good for a barzakh is like the doors in Wawa. So like it's double door in the 38, and so you hold the first door so that the person that you hold is going to hold the second door and you pass. So you know this sort of double doors.
Yes, and it keeps the cold out.
Yes. So this is a barzakh. So it's like from outside, when you are in between the two doors, you are neither inside Wawa nor outside Wawa. You are just in the passage between inside and outside. So there are, I mean, this is not a barrier, it's like a passage. It's neither this side nor that side. So this is what would be considered like a barzakh, just to give like a description of what the word is. Because when you say barrier, it reminds me of, it's coming from the other side of the world, like police barrier, and you are shouting behind the barrier.
What did you do on that side of the world?
So it looks like it's something that prevents you. But if it's a passage, it's another thing. So barzakh has this sort of a connotation.
And I guess passage implies accessibility, whereas barrier implies obstacles.
Yes.
Right. So
but it also says you need to take action to go to the other side. So it's not like once you enter to the passage, you're not in the other side of the passage. So. And I guess same thing applies for veils. In the original, yeah, he uses veil, but the word veil in that context is also like the screen as well, like
Projector screen.
projector screen. So a veil is something that doesn't show what is behind it, but also it is something that you can project something on top of it. So it has again a double duty, what you would call as a veil. Just, I mean, since this paragraph is very encrypted anyways, these are two keywords, I guess, which are within themselves carry further meanings.
But you know, call me greedy, but when I read this, my impulse now on exploring is that I want all the names. I want all of them. I want to go through all the passages. I want all the colors manifested, and I want them complete manifestations as well. Like, I don't even know what that means, but if there's something, and then I want it. But I guess whether that's possible for me or not, the absence of them also, whether it's in me or another person, allows me to realize their existence or why they should exist and why I do want them. And I'm not sure what he means that, let's say I pretend I understand what he means by the manifestation of the names taking on different forms in respect to universality and particularity, but I'm not as sure what they mean in terms of shadow or originality, especially originality. I am not sure of. He's introducing these terms without giving full definition.
I guess one example would be like you can receive the light of the sun. That will be original light of the sun. Or sometimes you see it through a moon. It's the shadow of this light of the sun.
Yeah.
First order derivative.
First order derivative, yes, for mathematicians. In all times, philosophers were also mathematicians. It's bad that it's true.
Pity. Standards have really dropped.
But anyway, this is, I guess, one example of, he says sometimes you see just the reflection of it, sometimes you see just the shadow of it, but some other places you see
From its direct source.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah.
And regarding, may I?
Yeah, please.
Since you're regarding your
Thanks for giving
comment,
me the illusion of power.
like I'm reading the paragraph, I don't see any part which says you have to stuck with a partial understanding. I don't see, you might be, but I don't see. Like when I read the paragraph, he says, Birkan, as a human being, you have all these infinite possibilities, all these infinitely many passages open in front of you. You may experience, you may take them, you might try to, understand them. This is how I see. That's one thing. Another thing, when you say, I want all of them, it reminded me, I'm not making an analogy with you and the person that I'm going to mention, but a little girl, a baby, we were playing with someone who had a lot of toys in the room. Like the room was full of toys. And the young child, the baby, she came, she was a guest in the house. She came to the room, so was, playing with all these toys. I was playing with the baby who is like an owner of all these toys, okay? So there are two babies. Anyway, the outsider, she comes, she saws all these toys, and she wants one of them. I gave it to her. She started playing, and then look at the other one. I want this as well. I gave it, she's just holding them. But still, oh no, I want this one. I want this one too. I want this one too. So they are toys, but she's not even playing with them. Right? She just say, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want all of them.
So now that you've captured the essence of my life,
But in reality, she doesn't want them. Like, she doesn't want the toys. She just wants to,
own them.
exactly, own them. It doesn't even matter she holds all of them or not, because like for her, maybe that's the only way of owning things. For babies, for Zainab, for instance, she has to hold them and she has to put them in her mouth, right? This is her owning the things. So if there are a lot of things in front of her, she has to put all of them into her mouth. So anyway, so for her, yeah, maybe that was the case. Like she wanted to own all of them, and that was the only way she knows of owning. She has to hold them. But if you ask to me, as an outsider, do you think she really wants them as these toys? I would say no. She's not even playing with them. So for some reason, this memory of mine came to my mind. Again, not making any analogy.
do we have any final remarks or comments? Our end, online end. Okay. Well, I think we can. I mean, I don't know if I have a conclusion to reach at necessarily, but if anything, it is that that I am being given manifestations of names, and that regardless of whether other people experience it or not, I experience it. I recognize the manifestation of such names in other people, and I also want to be able to actualize them in myself as well. At a minimum, maybe that's a basic thing to take away. But inshallah, we can continue from here. I think he will offer some. Nursi will offer some interesting further explanations that we can talk about for next week. But giving a last 10 seconds for any last remarks. Yes.
Just something maybe I could conclude from this. I'm thinking, like, what could I have learned from today? Let's say, like, Brother Birkan, a very amazing scientist, okay, understands numbers, first order derivatives, okay, and I understand nothing, but he doesn't have complete understanding, or he doesn't have a full grasp of first order derivatives because he's a human at the end of the day, and there are barriers. So even someone like me who comes and starts talking to him about first order derivatives, he should actually pay attention. He shouldn't just ignore me and say, who is this kid who is telling me about first order derivatives that I'm already so knowledgeable about? The barriers that he has may not be the ones that I have, and I may be able to speak to him about something that he actually couldn't see. So when I'm maybe in just every area of my life, even if I think I understand something and I see someone just repeating it, I should just actually sit down and say, I have barriers to how I understand, I have limits, and the way they're explaining it can have a different perspective, a different light, and can add something to me. Like, there's always more to learn in every event that I'm looking at, or everything I'm experiencing. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين.